Adam Waxman, thank you so much for being a guest on the Fact Up podcast. I appreciate your time. I know you're a family man as well, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Any other time I'd be asking you about hot trends, new chefs, up and coming kind of restaurants and kitchen nightmares, and as importantly, the fact that my mom learned how to speak English because of the King of Kensington. It was one of those shows. But times dictate a different type of interview today. You're the executive editor of DINE and Destinations magazines. For those who don't know, what is the magazine publication all about?
We write about lifestyle, wellness, and originally it was predominantly about restaurants, but it's become more about food, wine, travel, because that's such a big part of our culture and our interests.
I mean, here comes COVID-19. It's affecting all facets of our lives. It's going to do so for some time to come. The pandemic, how has it affected you personally and on a professional level with respect to the magazine itself?
Well, with respect to the magazine, everything we write about and everyone that we write about has to do with restaurants and tourism, which is all, it's dead right now. And that will come back. But in the meantime, we have to restructure how we do things and rethink how we do things going forward. So professionally, it's impacted every business. Every business has to, in some way or another, reinvent how they operate. Personally, I have a child who should be in school right now, and I'm relishing every day that we have together. I'm taking advantage of that, homeschooling him, playing catch with him. And I think a lot of parents are doing that. And I think in some respects, if you ignore or just put at bay the financial ruination of this, the family time is priceless. So I'm loving that.
Right. And not to delve too personally, I mean, do you think that is, I wouldn't say, I mean, there's a way of looking at things on a bright side, but, and without getting too personal, do you think that a lot of families, parents that our society dictates we work a lot and a badge of honor for the more hours that you work in a day, has that re-established the importance of family? Has it re-established the importance of making time more so for family?
Well, for me personally, I've been through divorce, so this is a Tuesday for me. Right. The social distancing, the financial ruin, this is not new. And fortunately, I live out in the country, so I'm not surrounded by the same anxiety that I probably would be if I was living in the city. But no, I think that it reinforces the family, because when you're stuck together all day, you can look at it as though you're stuck together, or you can look at it as though, hey, I have an opportunity here. And what I teach my son is to always look for the opportunity in the problem. So for example, we wake up in the morning, and I don't know about where you are, but I'm hearing birds. I feel like I'm in a Carpenter song. There are so many birds out singing right now, and it's a beautiful day. The parks are closed, but at least there is a sense of optimism when you hear that, and that there's always something to look forward to, and that if everybody would self-isolate, this could be done very quickly.
Far quicker, by far.
But in the meantime, I think everyone's having to be creative in business and in their personal lives. So, I'm creative with my son. I'm teaching him cooking, and with each dish, we made a dessert the other night that was from an area of Cambodia. And so, my son got to learn something about Cambodia as we were cooking.
Right, and those are priceless moments.
Yeah. So with each meal, we're doing something like that. And, I look at what I can impart to him. And so there's that aspect. And then we've been watching a lot of silent films. The Charlie Chaplin films are brilliant. I mean, I was laughing so hard, my head hurt.
Right.
And because it's silent, you know, that my child is more engaged. And then there's the title cards that he has to read. So I pause it and he has to read. So there's a lot of fun ways to educate.
Sure.
So we're
On a,
having a good time.
Yeah, that's great, and that's great to hear. It's a positive spin on what is otherwise a bombardment of news and negativity.
Yeah.
Professionally, how do you retool? You mentioned financial ruin. How do you retool professionally um, when this pandemic is done? What are you thinking about for the future as far as the publication is concerned?
Well, you can never go back to the way things were because it would be obtuse. You have to factor in that what's happening now, I believe, is an appendage of the climate crisis. And that has to be on everyone's mind going forward. And so the content that we promote, whether it's the advertising, the way that we want to structure the ads, our editorials, the look of the magazine, um, it has to factor in the times. It has to, in order to be relevant, it has to be sensitive to what's going on. And it's all so personal. So it must be.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're all trying to figure out now. Dining trends are going to change for certain. Even if all of this were over tomorrow, we're all going to have PTSD. And you know, there's a new trend called clockless dining, where rather than people having their 3 solid meals, people will eat at different times of the day. So maybe
Okay.
a restaurant, rather than opening at 5 and expecting their dinner rush around 7 and then closing at 10, maybe they'll be open earlier to stagger the rush.
Interesting.
And a lot of restaurants, I'm sure, will have to space out the tables. Maybe a 20-seater will become a 10-seater. So that's obviously going to affect income capacity. But maybe dining will become, ironically, a little more intimate. I think that certain aspects of the dining experience have to be appreciated more. And in terms of travel, there are certain domestic flights in the US where they have taken out the middle seats. I don't think that would make a difference, but I also think nobody's going to want to be packed like sardines anymore. And you know, right now I'm the tourism ambassador for Japan in Canada, trying to think of ways to promote Japan. There are so many tourist sites in Japan. In Kyoto alone, there's about 1,600 Buddhist temples, 400 Shinto shrines. People typically go to the same 4. That's going to change. Nobody's going to want to be packed with 50,000 other people and get clotheslined by selfie sticks. That's not in anyone's interest anymore. There'll be dark tours, like I think it's called dark tourism, where you're going in off-peak
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And you know, people are going to be looking more so than ever before on how to avoid the crowds.
How do you think places like the Dubrovniks of the world, the Venices of the world, will be able to tackle that when you have potentially in a year or two, or maybe even 5 years down the road, these massive cruise ships that are now making their return back to port? How do tourism boards and ambassadors in those kind of coastal towns, who depend so largely on that cruise tourism, what's the solution for them?
Well, would you want to go on a cruise? I mean, you know,
Right.
the cruise industry has to figure out a way. I mean, you know, I mentioned before about finding an opportunity in a problem. The reason why I wouldn't want to go on a cruise ship now is because we've heard too many times a cruise ship is like a petri dish.
Yep.
And so the opportunity in that is making the expectation a demand and making people feel safe again.
Hmm.
So if a cruise liner can prove to me that I'm not going to get sick and die because they are being obsessive compulsive about hygiene and sanitation, then the cruise industry will be up and running again, and I wouldn't see the problem going back to port. But certainly, there has to be a better management of tourism. In Japan, they have, again, there's something called tourism pollution,
Hmm.
where you get so many people going to one place. So that has to be managed.
Mhm.
And I remember years ago, I was trying to go to Bhutan. This is about 20 years ago. They had a law in place where they only allowed a couple hundred people a year.
Right.
And
Wow.
that's since changed.
Hmm.
But at the time, the belief was that tourism was bad for the environment and bad for their culture. Then they realized it was good for their economy.
Right.
But I think a lot of people are recognizing that economy has to take a back seat to so many other aspects of our lives, whether it be environment or culture or um, health,
Peace of mind at this
peace of
point.
mind, yeah,
Peace of
and
mind.
safety and security. There's so many other factors that have to be factored in right now. And how to manage a tourism during a crisis is something that's studied by a lot of groups. I was at a seminar in where Osaka in October, where different representatives of countries from Egypt to Russia, um, where else? Cambodia, places that had and still have certain conflicts, how they were able to manage tourism. You
Hmm.
remember a few years ago, Egypt, at the start of the Arab uprising, the Arab Spring, they had a huge, there was violence and their tourism plummeted, obviously. They've since rebounded and their tourism is stronger than it ever was before. So it's about finding a way to retune your message and
Yeah,
show
absolutely.
people it is safe,
Hmm.
but that's going to take effort. It's going to take a lot of marketing and branding, but a lot of concerted effort to make people feel and believe that it's safe to go out again.
And a setting aside of pride and ego as well to manage expectations and also points of views. Everybody seems to have a point of view when it comes to within the government of what should be done and how it should be done. Collectively, though, put it together. It's the same thing with Greece years ago when they were hit with economic destruction. They've recently seen the largest tourism numbers ever, 33 million, I think it was in 2018. So
Wow.
the peace of mind and the safety of the country, but also the economic stability and the fact that you will be taken care of well here. Don't worry.
Mhm.
Especially in cultures like the Greek. I'll speak for the Greek culture. Man, to
Yeah.
get on the same page sometimes is tooth and nail. You're fighting. So collectively, if you make that effort, absolutely, the world is open eventually, right? But you mentioned Japan. You and of course your mom Sarah, traveled and eaten your way around the world. Japan is a very special place in your heart, based on conversations you've had, experiences that you've had. From your point of view, the irreparable damage. Talk about that that the pandemic has done to small business, kind of locally as well as internationally.
Well, locally, I mean, for example, we have a movie theater here in Stratford. Nobody's going to want to sit in a movie theater right now. We have the Stratford Festival here. The
Huge.
theaters are typically dry and the audience is typically older. And so there's going to be a lot of coughing. There's always coughing. Now, one person coughs, that theater will clear out. And so how does the owner, the proprietor of that uh, business pay the rent or pay the property tax? It's devastating for everybody on every level. If and then how the mortgage deferrals are at 10% now, right? So
Mhm.
at some point, there's going to be no more money, and so obviously on a local level, on a federal level, it affects everybody, whether it's a deep recession or a depression. But the fact that it's happening to everyone and not just a few, hopefully, I think evokes some empathy. And while there is a lot of bad behavior going on right now, there's a lot of good behavior too. There are a lot of heroes stepping up and good Samaritans. And I think we're seeing the best and the worst. Internationally, I had actually planned the most epic adventure for me and my son to go to Japan on March 11th. And that was the same day that the World Health Organization declared this a pandemic. So I had obviously foreseen that. So I had canceled the trip 2 weeks earlier. But, internationally, some of the places that we were going were so remote, they're not being touched by this. except nobody's coming to visit anymore. And that's people's livelihood. Tourism has become such a big part of economy and livelihood that it's invariably affected and impacted everyone.
Right. Little small company, massive corporations.
Yeah,
It's
but it'll
incredible.
come back. I mean,
Yeah.
this will pass.
Mhm.
The important thing is, we're entering Passover, and I'm thinking, well, how am I going to have a Passover Seder? I can't even go to the store to get matzah.
Right.
But the point of Passover, I think, this year is to look at how, as a people, we got into this mess. Whether it's um, abusing the environment, urban sprawl, how cavalier we are with what we eat. And then going forward, how can we pass over into a better place?
Mhm.
How can we take this as a collective, as a learning experience, so that the next season, when this virus comes back, or when there's another coronavirus that comes about, that we're better prepared, or that we can avoid it altogether because our behaviors have been altered by this.
Sure. It's my mom is, she's in her early 80s. It's been difficult for me to visit her. She lives alone. She's a tiger, man. She's a little bull, but at the same time, she's in her 80s. You can't spend Easter with her. You try to help her out with the groceries. You can't do much. Um, my point where I'm going with that is you have an older generation that's still around, thankfully, who can teach us lessons from struggles that they've had, be it World War II, be it immigration, coming over here on a boat with that classic immigration story, $20 in your pocket, and all you're doing is trying to maybe figure out best practices to live your best life, as the kids like to say these days. But also that perspective of you've gone through difficult times, and this is what you've learned from these difficult times, and that in turn you instill into your kids, your nieces, your nephews, the next generation. But that said, you have 800,000 people in the restaurant industry across Canada that have now lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Restaurants are closing. 1 in 10 apparently will not reopen again. They've closed permanently. There's another 18 to 20% that, if the situation continues, they'll be closed within a month. What can people do today, the average Joe, to help small business restaurants until things kind of get back to a different type of normalcy?
It's so hard to say. I mean,
It's a loaded question, for
well,
sure.
first of all, you have to have the disposable income to order takeout.
Right.
Everybody is going through a period of rationing right now, and like my son doesn't understand that he only needs one Kleenex per sneeze.
Right.
So he is going through so much Kleenex, and I keep saying, I can't afford to go out and buy another box.
Yep.
So what you have in your hand is what you have all day.
Yep.
It's hard to get out of that frame of mind. And as much as I want to support local restaurants to, order in, it's there is that dichotomy, because I want to support, and this is, this is what I do. I think in what I do, I support restaurants, but at this time you have to have that income. And I don't know how or when that's going to change. Everybody's waiting for the government checks and the child tax credits, and we're all in this strange twilight zone limbo.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some mornings I wake up and I think, was this a dream? But
It's
then,
amazing, right? It's amazing because if you're celebrating New Year's Eve on December 31st, 2019, there's no way
yeah,
to know what you're in for.
yeah. I mean, 2020, everybody has, the 2020 vision, 2020 hindsight. This is the year that didn't happen. Looking forward to the summer, if we're still all cooped up in the summer, there's going to be riots. Forget about summer camp. It's really pushed everything back.
Right.
And so I don't know, in answer to your question, how to support a restaurant right now. I really wish I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have the money, and I mean, I only have one child, but I have friends who have 4 children. How do you you have to make ends meet right now. So if you can, I mean, I see a lot of Domino's cars going by. It seems that everybody's ordering pizza.
Mm-hmm.
If you can order something other than pizza, please do,
Right.
because those chains are going to be around, but it is the small businesses. And, I read about people who are trying to help and who are doing really inventive things. But even my son and I, we were thinking, what can we do? And every idea we had seemed to conflict with the notion that everyone's afraid of, catching something. Even helping deliver groceries for someone, they're going to be afraid of the virus or sanitation or hygiene.
Right.
So it's really hard to know what to do at this time.
It's really one of those things where they're telling you to stay inside, yet check up on your neighbor. Practice physical and social distancing, but make sure that your neighbor's all right. And if you're coming over there with plastic gloves and you're coming over there with plastic bags full of groceries, and maybe that person cannot clean that bag or clean those groceries, now what? So I totally mirror what you're saying there. It's you want to help. How do you help? But you want to help, but you just don't know how. And because your family is in a position that they're in, there's limited time and resources and funds to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I believe that when this is over, the second this is over, it will be the opposite of social distancing,
Right. Yep.
from dining to traveling to Tinder. But in the meantime, just making it from now until that point, whenever that is, if it's a bigger restaurant, they're taking a bigger hit. It really is an equalizer in that sense. Even, the biggest restaurants in the city, they might close just as quickly as the small mom and pop shop.
Sure. Yeah.
So, they have more staff, they have more property tax, more food waste. So I don't know, but I think afterwards, as a collective, we will have all been through something. And I imagine it's similar to our parents' generation coming out of World War II. There will be, this is what defines this generation.
Absolutely. You mentioned the government earlier. This is my final question, actually. The government came out with a small business kind of game plan, general, $2,000 a month for every individual, et cetera, et cetera. In your opinion, was it fair? Is it enough? What's missing?
Wow. Well, if I were to compare it to the United States, I think it's good. I haven't seen it yet, and I think it'll be a while before everybody sees it. I'm sure it's staggered in some way. Just because they announce something doesn't mean you're going to get it the next day,
Right.
and it has to go through the post. So who knows? But I don't know what fair is. I don't know what fair looks like. I just know that what's happening has nothing to do with fairness. It's what's happened, and it's what we can and cannot do. But we have to try to do the best we can with what we've got. And I mean, I'm counting down the seconds till I receive that. But in the meantime, I can't focus on what I don't have. I believe the only thing you can control in life is how you handle the things that you can't. And pessimism, fear, all of that is part and parcel of this endemic or pandemic. And this is a time to be reflective, try to focus on what you have that's good, and find some way to make that stretch, to make it last, because we're all in the same boat.
That's it. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time today. Dine and Destinations Magazine can be found on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Give it a follow. Adam is an amazing man at what he does. He's a family man as well. I would love to see you whenever the time is right, have a drink with you and come to your annual gala celebrating the publication and catch up in person.
And I would love to be on one of your tours when this is done.
Cheers,
I
mate.
want to be on a tour.
Man, I will take care of you as much as you've taken care of restaurants and your family and everything that matters to you in your own life. I wish you the best of health and happiness, and stay safe, my friend.
You
And
too.
thank
I
you
wish
so
you and
much.
your family good health, good cheer, and lots of love.
Cheers, mate. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Take care. Bye.